Have you ever felt like your life is quietly pulling you in a direction you can't fully explain? Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but in a subtle, persistent manner that keeps returning no matter how much you try to ignore it. It might appear during quiet moments when you reflect on your life, or in the middle of an ordinary day when a thought suddenly surfaces. There must be something more than this. For many people, that feeling comes and goes, but for some individuals it never truly disappears. It lingers beneath the surface, quietly shaping the way they think, the way they see the world, and the way they respond to the paths placed in front of them. Some people describe this experience as the calling of the soul. It is not necessarily a voice you can hear, nor is it always a clear instruction about what you should do next. Instead, it is a deep inner pull that feels impossible to completely silence. Even when life appears comfortable or stable on the outside, this inner sense continues to whisper that your story may not follow the same path as everyone else's. It is the quiet awareness that your life may carry a purpose that has not yet fully revealed itself. Throughout history and across different cultures, there has always been a fascination with individuals who seem to sense this calling more strongly than others. In many modern conversations, these individuals are often referred to as chosen ones. The phrase does not necessarily mean someone who is superior or more important than anyone else. Rather, it reflects the experience of people who feel a profound sense that their path may be different from what society typically expects. They often sense that their journey will require them to question familiar structures, challenge common assumptions, and sometimes walk alone while searching for something deeper. For many chosen ones, this realization begins as a quiet, inner tension. On the outside, they may appear to live an ordinary life. They go to school, pursue careers, maintain relationships, and follow routines that look similar to those around them. But internally, something feels different. They may notice that their thoughts often drift toward questions about meaning, purpose, and direction. They may feel unusually sensitive to the energy of the environments around them, and sometimes they may feel a subtle but undeniable sense that they are being pulled towards something they cannot yet clearly see. This experience raises a number of powerful questions. What exactly is this calling that so many people describe but struggle to define? Why do only certain individuals seem to feel it so intensely, while others remain completely content with the paths laid out before them? And perhaps the most important question of all, what happens when someone finally stops ignoring that inner pull and decides to listen to it? For some, answering that question becomes the turning point of their entire life. The moment they begin to acknowledge the calling of their soul, they often discover that the journey ahead is not simply about success or achievement. Instead, it becomes a process of understanding who they truly are, what they are meant to contribute to the world, and how they can align their life with something greater than external expectations. In this video, we are going to explore the deeper meaning behind the calling of the soul, and why it is often associated with the path of the chosen one. We will look at how this calling begins, why it can feel both inspiring and unsettling, and what it means for those who feel that their life is being guided by something deeper than coincidence. And before we go further, if this message resonates with you in any way, take a moment to like and share this video with someone who might also feel this inner pull. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more insights about the journey of the chosen ones. For many people who later recognize themselves as walking the path of the chosen one, the journey does not begin with a dramatic event. It does not begin with a sudden revelation or a moment that instantly changes everything. Instead, the first sign often appears in a much quieter form. It begins as a persistent inner voice, a subtle awareness that something about their life carries a deeper meaning that has not yet been fully revealed. At first, this feeling can be difficult to describe. On the surface, everything may appear completely ordinary. The person may follow the expected path laid out by society. They may attend school, pursue a career, maintain relationships, and participate in the routines that define everyday life. From the outside, there may be nothing unusual about their circumstances. Friends and family might see them as someone who is simply living a normal life. Yet internally, something feels slightly out of alignment. This inner experience is often the earliest signal of a soul calling. It appears as a quiet but steady awareness that life may hold a larger purpose. The individual may not know what that purpose is. In fact, Most people who experience this feeling cannot clearly explain it at all. They simply sense that their life is not meant to follow a completely predictable pattern. There is a subtle pull towards something that exists just beyond the edges of their current understanding. For many chosen ones, this feeling shows up through intuition. They may notice that their instincts guide them in ways that are difficult to explain logically, while others around them rely primarily on external expectations or practical reasoning. These individuals often feel guided by an inner compass. Sometimes this intuition leads them to question situations that appear normal to everyone else. At other times, it pushes them toward opportunities or ideas that seem unusual or unconventional. What makes this experience particularly powerful is that it tends to repeat itself over time. It is not a single thought that appears once and disappears. Instead, it returns again and again, often in moments of quiet reflection. A person might be sitting alone at night, thinking about their life, when the same question surfaces once more. They might ask themselves whether they are truly living the life they are meant to live. They might wonder if there is a path waiting for them that they have not yet discovered. These recurring thoughts about a different path can become difficult to ignore. Even when someone tries to focus entirely on their responsibilities or follow the expectations placed upon them, the same inner signal continues to reappear. It can arise during moments of dissatisfaction, when something about their routine feels empty or incomplete. It can also appear during moments of inspiration, when they encounter an idea or experience that suddenly feels deeply meaningful. One of the most challenging aspects of this stage is that the calling rarely arrives with clear instructions. The inner voice does not typically say exactly what someone should do or where they should go. Instead, it communicates through feelings, impressions, and subtle realizations. A person may sense that their current environment does not fully reflect who they truly are. They may feel that the roles they have been assigned do not entirely fit the person they are becoming. This often creates an internal tension. On one side, there is the life that has been built according to familiar expectations. On the other side, there is a growing awareness that something deeper may be waiting beyond those expectations. The individual may begin to notice that the goals they once believed were important no longer bring the same sense of fulfillment. Achievements that once seemed significant may begin to feel strangely incomplete. During this stage, many chosen ones start to realize that the conventional path presented by society does not fully align with their inner sense of identity. They may find themselves questioning ideas that once seemed obvious. For example, they might question whether success is defined solely by financial stability or social recognition. They might wonder whether true fulfillment requires something more meaningful than simply meeting external standards. These realizations can be both exciting and unsettling. On one hand, the awareness of a deeper purpose can create a sense of possibility. It suggests that life may hold experiences and opportunities that go beyond routine patterns. On the other hand, it can also create uncertainty. When someone begins to sense that their path may be different, they may also realize that they cannot easily explain this feeling to others. This is one of the reasons why the inner voice of a soul calling often remains private for a long time. People who experience it may hesitate to talk about it openly because it is difficult to put into words. If they attempt to describe it, others may misunderstand their meaning or interpret it as simple dissatisfaction with life. But for the chosen one, the experience feels deeper than ordinary frustration. It feels like a signal that their life is gradually preparing them for something that has not yet fully appeared. Another important aspect of this calling is its persistence. Unlike passing emotions, it does not disappear when circumstances change. A person may try to suppress the feeling by focusing on practical responsibilities or by convincing themselves that their current path is good enough. For a while, this approach may seem to work. The individual may become busy with daily tasks, professional ambitions, or social obligations. Yet eventually, the same quiet voice returns. It may appear in the form of curiosity about a different field of interest, a sudden inspiration to pursue a creative idea, or a powerful moment of reflection that brings new clarity. Each time it returns, it gently reminds the individual that there is something within them that has not yet been fully expressed. This persistence is one of the defining characteristics of a soul calling. It does not force itself aggressively into a person's life. Instead, it waits patiently, appearing again whenever the individual is ready to notice it. Over time, the person begins to recognize a pattern. They realize that this inner pull has been present for years, sometimes even since childhood. When they look back on their past, they may notice that certain experiences always seem to stand out more than others. Perhaps they felt drawn to particular ideas, creative pursuits, or forms of understanding that did not match the interests of the people around them. Perhaps they felt unusually sensitive to questions about meaning, purpose, and personal growth. These memories begin to form a larger picture. The individual starts to see that the calling of their soul has been quietly guiding them all along. Even when they were unaware of it, their thoughts and experiences were slowly shaping the direction of their journey. What makes this stage so significant is that it represents the first real contact between the chosen one and their deeper purpose. At this point, the calling has not yet demanded action. It has not yet required major decisions or dramatic changes. Instead, it simply asks the individual to notice its presence. The moment someone begins to recognize this inner voice is often the beginning of a much larger transformation. Once they realize that the feeling is real and persistent, it becomes increasingly difficult to pretend that it does not exist. The quiet voice continues to speak, reminding them that their life may hold a direction that is waiting to be discovered. And for many chosen ones, this realization marks the beginning of a journey that will eventually reshape the way they see themselves, their purpose, and their place in the world. The calling of the soul begins quietly, but once it is heard, it rarely fades away. It remains present, patient and steady, guiding the individual step by step toward the path that has been waiting for them all along. As the inner calling of the soul becomes clearer, many people who walk the path of the chosen one begin to notice another unexpected part of the journey. Alongside the growing awareness of purpose, there often comes a period of isolation. This isolation does not always appear suddenly, and it does not necessarily mean that a person is physically alone. Instead, it often develops gradually as the individual begins to change internally while the world around them remains the same. When someone starts listening to their inner calling, the first transformation usually happens in their thinking. Ideas that once felt unquestionable may begin to lose their certainty. The goals that once motivated them may no longer hold the same power. They may start to reflect more deeply on the meaning of their actions, the direction of their life, and the values they truly want to follow. This shift in perspective can be subtle at first, but over time, it becomes more noticeable. As these changes unfold, the individual may begin to realize that their priorities are evolving. Conversations that once seemed interesting may start to feel repetitive or superficial. Environments that once felt comfortable may begin to feel restrictive. They may develop a stronger interest in understanding themselves, exploring deeper questions about life, or pursuing creative and meaningful work that reflects their inner truth. These changes do not always align with the expectations of the people around them. Friends, family members, or colleagues may continue to follow familiar routines and priorities. From their perspective, nothing has changed. But from the perspective of the chosen one, something significant is shifting internally. The way they see the world is gradually transforming, and this transformation can create distance between them and their previous environment. One of the first experiences that often arises during this stage is the feeling of being misunderstood. When individuals attempt to express their new perspectives, they may discover that others do not fully understand what they mean. Their thoughts may seem unusual, overly reflective, or unnecessary to those who are comfortable with the conventional path. As a result, the chosen one may begin to feel that the deeper parts of their experience cannot easily be shared. This sense of misunderstanding does not necessarily come from hostility or rejection. In many cases, the people around them simply cannot relate to the changes that are taking place. They may encourage the individual to remain practical, to focus on stability, or to follow the same path that everyone else follows. While these suggestions are often offered with good intentions, they can create an internal conflict for someone who feels a growing need to explore a different direction. Over time, this difference in perspective can lead to another form of isolation. The individual may begin to grow apart from certain social circles. Activities that once brought enjoyment may no longer feel meaningful. Conversations that once felt natural may begin to feel disconnected from the deeper questions that now occupy their thoughts. Without intending to withdraw completely, They may slowly spend less time in environments that no longer resonate with who they are becoming. This gradual separation can be confusing at first. The chosen one may wonder whether something is wrong with them. They may question whether they are overthinking or imagining changes that are not really there. Yet as time passes, the pattern becomes clearer. The distance they feel is not simply the result of mood or circumstance. It is a reflection of an internal transformation that is altering the way they relate to the world. Another aspect of this stage is the development of emotional and intellectual solitude. Even when surrounded by people, the chosen one may feel that their deepest thoughts exist in a private space that few others can enter. They may become more introspective, spending longer periods reflecting on their experiences, exploring ideas, or observing the patterns that shape human behavior. To an outside observer, this period might appear lonely or even troubling. However, in many spiritual and personal development narratives, this phase of isolation is not viewed as a failure or a loss. Instead, it is understood as an important transition that allows deeper self-discovery to take place. When the noise of external expectations begins to fade, a person gains the opportunity to hear their inner voice more clearly. Isolation creates the conditions for reflection. Without constant pressure to conform to social expectations, the individual can begin to examine their beliefs more honestly. They can ask themselves questions that might never arise in a busy or distracting environment. What do I truly value? What kind of life feels authentic to me? What am I meant to contribute to the world? These questions often require time and silence to fully explore. In a constantly active social environment, it can be difficult to hear the subtle signals of intuition and self-awareness. But during periods of solitude, the mind becomes more receptive to deeper insights. The individual may begin to notice patterns in their past experiences, recognizing how certain events or interests have been guiding them toward a particular direction. During this time, the chosen one may also discover strengths that were previously hidden beneath routine and expectation. Creative abilities, intellectual curiosity, or emotional sensitivity may begin to develop more fully. Without the pressure to conform to familiar roles, the individual gains the freedom to explore aspects of their identity that were once ignored or overlooked. Another important benefit of this phase is clarity. When a person steps away from environments that constantly shape their decisions, they gain a new perspective on their life. They can observe which parts of their past were truly aligned with their values and which parts were simply the result of external influence. This clarity does not always arrive quickly, but as reflection continues, the direction of their path becomes easier to recognize. It is also during this period that many chosen ones begin to understand that isolation does not necessarily mean permanent separation from others. Instead, it represents a temporary space in which they can reconnect with their authentic self. By understanding who they truly are and what they genuinely seek, they prepare themselves to form deeper and more meaningful connections in the future. The journey through isolation often teaches patience and resilience. It requires the courage to trust an inner process that cannot always be explained to others. At times, the individual may feel uncertain about whether they are moving in the right direction, yet the quiet voice that first signaled their calling continues to guide them, encouraging them to remain open to growth and discovery. Gradually, the chosen one begins to see that this phase of solitude is not an obstacle placed in their path. It is part of the path itself. The distance they feel from familiar environments is not a punishment, but a necessary step in their transformation. Through reflection, introspection, and personal growth, they are learning to align their life more closely with the deeper purpose that first called to them. In this way, isolation becomes a powerful teacher. It shows the chosen one that true understanding often emerges in silence, and that clarity about one's purpose cannot always be found in the noise of everyday expectations. By stepping into this quieter space, they gain the opportunity to listen more carefully to their own soul and to prepare for the next stage of their journey. As the journey continues and the inner voice becomes impossible to ignore, there comes a moment when the chosen one begins to clearly recognize what has been happening all along. The quiet pull that once felt mysterious or confusing gradually reveals itself as something real and meaningful. What once appeared as scattered thoughts, moments of dissatisfaction, or sudden flashes of intuition now begins to form a pattern. The individual realizes that the voice within them has been guiding their awareness toward a deeper truth about their life. At this stage of the journey, a new realization begins to emerge. The calling of the soul is not simply a feeling that appears for no reason. It is an invitation. It asks the individual to consider whether they are willing to step beyond the boundaries of familiarity and explore the path that their inner voice has been quietly pointing toward. For many chosen ones, this realization brings both clarity and tension at the same time. The clarity comes from finally understanding that the inner pull they have felt for so long is not an illusion. It is not simply restlessness or dissatisfaction with ordinary life. Instead, it represents a deeper alignment between who they truly are and what they are meant to become. The tension, however, arises because recognizing the calling also means recognizing that a choice must be made. Once a person becomes aware of their calling, they cannot completely return to the state of unawareness that existed before. The knowledge itself changes how they see their life. They begin to understand that continuing along the same path without question may no longer feel authentic. Yet choosing to follow the calling may require changes that feel uncertain or even intimidating. For this reason, many people who reach this stage of awareness find themselves standing at a crossroads. In a very real sense, two paths appear before them. Neither path is necessarily easy, and both require a decision about how they want to live their life moving forward. One possible response is to ignore the calling. This choice is more common than many people realize, and it often happens for understandable reasons. Society places a strong emphasis on stability, predictability, and security. From a practical perspective, it can seem wiser to follow the established path that has already been accepted by the people around us. Continuing with familiar routines, pursuing conventional goals, and maintaining the structures that already exist can feel safe and manageable. For someone who has begun to hear the calling of their soul, choosing this path may initially bring a sense of relief. By setting aside the inner voice, they can focus entirely on the responsibilities and expectations that define everyday life. They may continue building their career, maintaining relationships, and following the milestones that society presents as markers of success. On the surface, life may appear stable and even successful. The individual may achieve many of the goals that once seemed important. They may gain financial security, social recognition, or a sense of belonging within familiar structures. To those observing from the outside, everything may appear perfectly normal. Yet beneath this stability, something often remains unresolved. The inner voice that once signaled a deeper purpose does not completely disappear. It may grow quieter for a time, especially when the individual becomes busy with practical concerns. But in moments of reflection, the same question often returns. The person may begin to wonder whether they have left something important unexplored. This lingering awareness can create a subtle but persistent feeling that something is missing. It is not necessarily regret in the dramatic sense. Instead, it appears as a quiet curiosity about what might have happened if they had chosen differently. They may sense that there was a path waiting for them that they never fully explored. Over time, this awareness can lead to a deeper recognition that the calling of the soul was never meant to be ignored permanently. The second possible response is to answer the calling. This choice often requires courage because it involves stepping into the unknown. Unlike the familiar path of social expectations, the path of the soul does not always provide clear instructions or guarantees. The individual may not immediately know where the journey will lead, or how their life will change as a result. Choosing to answer the calling often begins with a simple but powerful decision. The person decides to take their inner voice seriously. Instead of dismissing the feeling as imagination or uncertainty, they begin to explore what it might mean. They start paying closer attention to the interests, passions, and ideas that repeatedly capture their attention. This exploration can take many forms. Some people feel drawn toward creative expression, intellectual discovery, or spiritual understanding. Others may feel inspired to pursue work that aligns more closely with their values, or to contribute to causes that reflect their deeper sense of purpose. In each case, the common element is the willingness to move toward what feels authentic, even if the outcome is not immediately predictable. Following the calling of the soul often requires change. The individual may need to release certain beliefs, habits, or expectations that once defined their identity. They may discover that some environments no longer support the direction they are moving toward. At times, this process can feel challenging because growth rarely occurs without some degree of uncertainty. However, alongside this uncertainty, something remarkable often begins to happen. As the chosen one moves closer to the path that resonates with their inner truth, they start to experience a new sense of alignment. Their actions begin to reflect who they truly are, rather than who they believed they were expected to be. The effort they invest in their life starts to feel meaningful rather than merely obligatory. This alignment allows individuals to discover abilities and passions that may have remained hidden if they had continued following a conventional path. Talents that once seemed insignificant may become central to their purpose. Ideas that once felt unrealistic may reveal themselves as important contributions to the world around them. In many interpretations of the Chosen One narrative, the purpose of answering the calling is often misunderstood. It is not about becoming superior to others or achieving a special status that separates one person from the rest of humanity. The calling of the soul does not elevate someone above others in terms of worth or importance. Instead, the calling represents an invitation to live authentically. It encourages individuals to become the most honest expression of who they are meant to be. By doing so, they naturally bring something unique into the world. Their insights, creativity, compassion, or leadership can influence others in ways that would not have been possible if they had ignored their inner voice. Answering the calling also changes how a person understands success. Rather than measuring their life solely through external achievements, they begin to evaluate it through alignment with their values and purpose. Success becomes the process of contributing meaningfully, growing continuously, and living in a way that reflects their deepest understanding of themselves. As this realization deepens, the Chosen One begins to see that the calling of the soul was never meant to be a burden. It is not a demand for perfection or an obligation to achieve extraordinary things. Instead, it is an opportunity to participate more fully in the unfolding of one's own life. The decision to answer the calling ultimately transforms the journey from a search into a path of discovery. Instead of wondering whether their life has meaning, the individual begins actively shaping that meaning through their choices, actions, and willingness to follow the quiet guidance of their inner voice. And as this process continues, the Chosen One gradually realizes that the path they once feared was uncertain is actually the path that leads them closer to their true self. The calling of the soul was never about escaping the world. It was about discovering how to live within it, with clarity, authenticity, and purpose. As we reach the end of this reflection, it becomes clear that the journey of the Chosen One rarely begins with something dramatic or obvious. More often, it begins quietly. It starts with a subtle feeling that something about life is different for you. Perhaps it appears as a persistent inner voice that refuses to disappear, or as a quiet awareness that your path may hold a deeper meaning than what is immediately visible. For many people, this feeling may pass unnoticed or be dismissed as a moment of curiosity. But for those who truly feel the calling of their soul, the experience tends to remain present, patiently waiting to be acknowledged. Throughout this video, we have explored how this calling often begins as an internal signal that something within you is searching for expression. It may appear as intuition guiding your thoughts, as recurring reflections about your purpose, or as a quiet tension between the life you are living and the life you feel drawn toward. At first, the message may seem unclear. You may not know exactly what direction it is pointing to, yet the persistence of the feeling suggests that it is not random. It is an invitation to look deeper into who you are and what your life might truly represent. For many who walk the path often described as the journey of the Chosen One, the calling of the soul eventually becomes a defining part of their personal story. It encourages them to question familiar expectations and to look beyond the patterns that society often presents as the only possible path. This does not necessarily mean rejecting the world or distancing oneself from others. Instead, it means becoming more aware of the difference between living according to external expectations and living in alignment with one's authentic nature. The journey itself is rarely simple. As we have discussed, the awakening of this calling can bring moments of confusion, periods of isolation, and difficult decisions about how to move forward. Yet these experiences are not signs that something has gone wrong. In many ways, they represent the natural stages of a deeper transformation. When a person begins to listen to the quiet voice of their soul, they begin to see their life from a new perspective. The questions they ask change. The values they prioritize evolve. Gradually, they begin to shape a life that reflects their deeper understanding of themselves. What makes this journey meaningful is not the idea of being special or superior to others. The concept of the chosen one is often misunderstood when interpreted in that way. The true significance of the calling lies in authenticity. It is the process of recognizing that each person carries within them a unique perspective, a unique set of experiences, and a unique way of contributing to the world. When someone chooses to listen to their inner voice and follow the direction it reveals, they are not elevating themselves above others. Instead, they are simply stepping into the role that their life has been quietly preparing them for. This realization often brings a new sense of clarity. The chosen one begins to understand that purpose is not always something that arrives fully formed or clearly defined. It unfolds gradually through reflection, exploration, and the willingness to remain open to growth. Each step forward reveals another piece of the larger picture. Over time, the path that once seemed uncertain begins to feel more natural because it is aligned with the truth that has always existed within. And perhaps this leads us to the most important reflection of all. When people hear about the calling of the soul, they often ask whether such a calling truly exists. They search for proof, explanations, or signs that confirm the idea. But maybe the real question is not about whether the calling exists. Maybe the deeper question is far more personal. Maybe the real question isn't whether the calling exists, but whether you're ready to listen to it. If this video spoke to you, take a moment to like and share it with someone who might also be on a similar journey of self-discovery. And if you want to explore more ideas about purpose, awakening, and the path of the chosen ones, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video.